I'll never forget the sight, Karen standing in my driveway, arms crossed, ordering a tow truck driver to hook up my pickup like she owned it. She didn't expect my dad to step outside, flip open his leather wallet, and flash a gold badge that made her face drain of color. In that instant, Karen realized she'd messed with the wrong family. Before I dive into the full story, let me say this: if you enjoy true tales of HOA overreach and neighborhood Karens getting exactly what they deserve, don't forget to subscribe. These stories aren't just entertaining, they're proof that dignity and fairness always win in the end. Life had been simple before Karen arrived. My wife and I had bought the old family house after my folks downsized. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and my truck was my pride and joy. It wasn't some rust bucket either, it was a clean, well-kept Ford, the kind of pickup that had seen road trips, fishing weekends, and plenty of Sunday washes. Most neighbors were fine with it. Some even borrowed it when they needed to haul a load of mulch or help with a move. That's the kind of community we'd always had. But then Karen moved in 2 doors down. From the start, she came in hot. Within a week she'd slipped a note under my door: trucks aren't allowed in this neighborhood. Move it or face fines. I chuckled when I read it. We didn't even have a formal HOA, just a voluntary association that collected money for landscaping and snow plowing. They had no authority to enforce vehicle bans. When I told my dad, he smirked. Sounds like you've got a neighborhood Karen on your hands. But Karen wasn't just content with notes. 2 days later, she confronted me while I was unloading groceries. You can't park that thing here, she snapped, pointing at the truck. This is a residential community, not a junkyard. I set down the bags and smiled politely. Ma'am, it's my driveway. The truck stays. Her nostrils flared. We'll see about that. The we'll see part came sooner than I expected. That Friday evening, I came home late from work to find a bright orange sticker slapped on my windshield: violation, unauthorized vehicle. I peeled it off and shook my head. Karen, I muttered. The next morning, she caught me outside. Did you get my warning? She asked, smug as ever. I raised an eyebrow. Your warning? You don't run this street. Karen's smile widened. Oh, I do more than you think. I didn't know what she meant then, but I'd find out soon enough. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the rumble of a tow truck jolted me from the living room. I looked outside, and there it was, backing into my driveway. Karen stood beside it, arms folded like a general overseeing troops. Whoa, whoa, whoa! I yelled, rushing outside. What do you think you're doing? The tow driver shrugged. Lady says this truck isn't allowed here. I got the call. I glared at Karen. You called a tow truck for my vehicle on my property? She sneered. Rules are rules. You should have listened. My hands clenched into fists. I was seconds from exploding when the screen door creaked open. My dad, who'd been staying with us for the week, stepped onto the porch. Calm, steady, unreadable. Is there a problem here? He asked. Karen turned toward him, chin high. Yes. Your son's truck is a violation. I've ordered it removed. That's when Dad reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a gleaming badge. His voice dropped into that commanding tone I'd grown up with. Ma'am, he said firmly, I'm a state police officer. And unless you want to explain to a judge why you're trespassing and attempting to steal private property, I suggest you back off. Karen's jaw dropped. The tow driver froze mid-step. And me? I just stood there, stunned. I'd never seen my dad pull rank like that at home. Karen stammered, W wait, you can't, Dad's eyes locked on hers. Try me. At that moment, Karen froze. And for the first time since she moved in, she had no comeback. Karen stood frozen in my driveway, her face pale as my dad's badge glinted in the sunlight. The tow truck driver shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. Dad didn't raise his voice, but his tone was ice. Driver, I suggest you leave immediately before you get tangled in a criminal complaint. You have no authority here, and this woman has misled you. The driver nodded quickly. Sir, I don't want trouble. I'm gone. He unhooked the chains, climbed back into his truck, and rumbled away down the street. Karen's bravado collapsed. For once, she didn't look like a queen giving orders, she looked like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. You can't scare me with that badge, she tried weakly. Dad stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. This isn't about scaring you. It's about law. What you did here tonight, trespassing, attempting to tow private property under false authority, that's attempted theft. And if you try it again, I will make sure charges are filed. Karen blinked, backing up. You wouldn't, I would, Dad said flatly. And you'd lose. With that, she spun on her heel and stormed off toward her house. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But Karen wasn't done. The very next day, an email blasted out to half the neighborhood. Residents, please be advised that trucks parked in driveways are against community standards. Non-compliance will lead to forced removal. It was signed, Karen Whitfield, HOA Volunteer Coordinator. When I read it, my blood boiled. We didn't even have a governing HOA anymore, the old association had dissolved years ago. Karen was just a self-appointed dictator, throwing her weight around. Dad read the email and chuckled. Looks like she wants to play politics. Fine. We'll give her an audience. That Friday, we attended the monthly neighborhood meeting at the community center. Normally only a handful of people showed up, but word of Karen's antics must have spread, because the place was packed. Karen was already at the front with a clipboard, smiling smugly as if she were running the show. Good evening, everyone, she began, clearing her throat. As you know, I've taken the initiative to enforce long-neglected rules in our neighborhood. Starting with vehicle bans. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded nervously, but others frowned. One man raised his hand. Excuse me, but who elected you to do this? Karen stiffened. Well, nobody. But someone had to step up. That's when Dad rose from his seat. Calm, commanding, his badge clipped plainly to his belt. My name is Frank Carter. I'm a state police officer. And I want to clarify something important. This neighborhood has no legal HOA authority. There are no enforceable rules banning vehicles. Anyone who tells you otherwise is misleading you. Gasps filled the room. Karen's eyes widened. Dad continued, last week, this woman attempted to tow my son's truck off private property using false claims. She called a tow company under the pretense of HOA authority. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not leadership, it's abuse. The room erupted. Neighbors began whispering, some shaking their heads, others glaring at Karen. Karen shot up from her chair. He's lying. He's twisting the truth. I was only trying to keep standards, enough, an elderly neighbor shouted. We're tired of your boss, Karen. You don't speak for us. Another woman stood. You scared my daughter last week, banging on our door about curfew violations. Who do you think you are? The meeting dissolved into a chorus of voices, angry, fed up, united. Karen's face turned crimson. Her clipboard shook in her hands. Finally, she dropped it, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out of the building. From that night forward, Karen was done. Nobody answered her emails. Nobody followed her rules. The tow truck never came back. Within weeks, she put her house up for sale. The for sale sign felt like the biggest victory of all. One evening, as Dad and I sat on the porch, he chuckled. Funny thing about bullies. They shout the loudest until someone calls their bluff. I grinned. You really think she's gone for good? Dad shrugged. Maybe she'll find another neighborhood to bother. But not this one. Not anymore. Months later, the neighborhood felt peaceful again. Trucks, cars, flags, all parked and displayed proudly without Karen's interference. Neighbors who barely spoke before were now friendlier, grateful for what Dad had done. And me? I never looked at my truck the same way again. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore, it was the line in the sand that proved we wouldn't be pushed around. The moral's simple: respect and fairness matter more than fake authority. If you let people like Karen run wild, they'll strip you of your dignity. But when you stand firm, and when truth steps in with a badge, bullies freeze. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes, it comes from a quiet man stepping out onto his porch and reminding the world that real authority doesn't need to shout.